we're a 4-year-old company, and there were 3 co-founders at the start, Suraj, Mohit, and myself, and we were at Bain together. At Bain, we had spent about 3 years looking at the Indian telecom market. And I think what was becoming clear was that internet was going to be a fairly sort of large revolution over the next 5 years. And this is about 2009, 10-ish. The three of us decided that we wanted to be a part of that story and not consult for it, but actually do something more actively. And we were looking at options within the internet world. One of the options at that time, obviously, was that we go out and start something that would look like a Flipkart or a Snapdeal or an Amazon. But we decided that there were going to be enough players doing that anyway. And so we went and met all of these guys and said, what are the big challenges that everybody faces in this space? And all the way from a Zomato who was doing this for restaurants to a Flipkart to an Urban Touch, which was one of our first clients, said logistics was one of their biggest challenges. And so we said, all right, that looks like a very big opportunity, and we can create sort of a channel neutral platform. And that's how we started Delhivery, by actually delivering food for multiple restaurants. And then we started delivering medicines, and we started delivering flowers. And eventually we moved away from that local market into full-scale e-commerce delivery. So that's really the genesis of the idea. I think from a financial standpoint, what was clear was online retail would be sort of like a $70-80 billion market. Now people think it's going to be a $140 billion market. And about 10 to 15% of that gets spent on the supply chain. And so we said, look, even going in, we know we're entering a $10-12 billion space. So there's an opportunity to create a very big company here. That was the attraction. From a competitive standpoint, what was interesting was it was a space with huge existing players. There was DHL through Blue Dart. There was Federal Express when they acquired AFL and PAFX. We had TNT in India. There was DTDC and a bunch of other big players. So we knew we were getting into a space with the big boys. It really wasn't us getting into an uncharted territory. What sort of gave us the confidence to go in was, historically logistics in India had been sort of a low-tech, blue-collar space. And we said this is the first time people with our backgrounds are really going to get into this industry. So I think we have a chance to think differently, specifically with the use of technology. B was as companies become large, they sort of stop focusing on the next wave of growth. They spend too much time protecting what they already have. And I think if you look at the Indian logistics companies, there is no way they should have allowed us 4 years ago to do what we did. They should have spotted the trend and actually been there, but they weren't. They were too focused on protecting their B2B businesses and their document businesses. And that created a fantastic opportunity for someone like us to come in and take the risk. And that was sort of why we got into it. We said, look, big market, internet's going to happen. A lot of people are going to sell a lot of things online. No competitors are focused on this. It's a fabulous sort of situation for a startup to be in. And the best part of it was, unlike online retail, I shouldn't say that they're my clients, but at the end of the day, online retail has tough economics. You need to become very big very quickly for the economics to work out. So, for every 100 startups that get created in that space, you only get one Flipkart and one Snapdeal. But in our business, there was a real chance to build a profitable, large business in a fairly short period of time. And that's sort of what led to Delhivery. It was a pivot. Part of the reason was when we started off with local delivery services, which today has again sort of come back into the mainstream. Our assumption was that a lot of people would have smartphones. And I think we overestimated smartphone penetration in 2011. We had hit about 1,000 orders a day in Gurgaon, and it wasn't like that part of the business wasn't doing well. But what was interesting was a number of e-commerce companies started reaching out to us. In fact, the first three were Urban Touch, which used to do personal care products, Health Cart, which used to sell health products and protein supplements, and Times Internet, which was the India Times group. And they reached out to us and said, look, if you can deliver in 30 minutes, why don't you deliver our products as well? And our warehouses happen to be in Gurgaon. Our customers are in Gurgaon. So, funnily enough, we started the e-commerce business as an add-on to the original business, which was local delivery. And we said, look, all of the orders come during lunch and they come in the evening. We've got all this time in the afternoon. Why don't we go out and do e-commerce then? And I think within about 4 months, 3 months actually, I remember now, it was May, June, July. We suddenly realized that our e-commerce volumes were about 4 times the size of our non-e-commerce volumes. That actually is the moment the penny dropped and we said, look, what is going on? Why are we getting all of this demand and why is nobody else able to do this? And that's when we realized our competitors were slow, they weren't focusing on technology, cash management was an issue. And we said, hang on, this is an even larger opportunity than the one we're already pursuing. Would we have gone down the same path in the future? Possibly. Because I think even now as an e-commerce delivery business, we're looking back at local and saying we're going to go back into local because we now have the scale and the market's sort of more ready. But I think what's interesting from our own histories is that we pivoted very quickly because we saw a large opportunity. And I think that's something that's been a feature of the company as we've grown. Every time we've seen an opportunity, we've been pretty quick to sort of move into that space and dedicate all of our attention to it. So yeah, was it a pivot? Yes. Did we do it because there was a large opportunity? Absolutely. When we pivoted, we were about 100 people. And so, look, at that point, it didn't seem like a very big deal because we knew every guy by first name. So we said, hey guys, starting tomorrow, we are going to deliver lots of products for these various e-commerce companies. I think at that stage, it wasn't also a challenge because we were very clear as to why we were making the switch. It wasn't one of those, let's make a switch to see what the next product is that we can build that will work kind of thing. It was very clear that we knew how to service the space we were getting into. There was a clear value proposition because clients had come to us versus us trying to go to clients and say, do you have a need for my product or my service? So it wasn't much of a challenge. Since we had no knowledge of what we were doing, we just started with absolutely first principles. We said, look, there's a box here which needs to go there. And that there could be 10 kilometers away, it could be next door, it could be another city, it could be another country. And what is therefore the most efficient way for me to move this box from point A to point B? We ended up asking very fundamental questions of what companies had been taking for granted. Right? For instance, in logistics, as you get larger, it's a very commonly held view that you must build to a hub and spoke model. I think we were the first guys to say, hang on, why would you build a hub and spoke model at all? Because you end up moving the shipment to too many points when you build a hub and spoke model. And that allowed us to sort of experiment very quickly. We said, okay, let's not build a hub and spoke, let's build the model and let's try it out. And we started off with 5 stations in Delhi. We just kept moving things between stations instead of moving them through a central hub. Worked out really, really well. And we said, hang on, are we onto something here? Do we have a scalable model? And we said, let's just go. Similarly, whether it was dealing with airlines, whether it was figuring out how to package a product, whether it was figuring out how to build a warehouse. On warehousing, we have an interesting story. Our lead clients, we were a transportation company. Our lead client came to us and said, hey guys, do you know anything about warehouses? We said, no. They said, okay. Do you want to run our warehouse? We said, okay, why not? And then he said, well, the problem is I don't have a warehouse. So we said, hang on, what do you want us to do? They said, well, I'm planning to set up a warehouse in Chennai. Can you guys go and set it up? We said, okay, fine. We don't know anything about warehouses. We have no idea how they run. We have no idea what the economics of a warehouse are. We've never been to Chennai. And we said, all right. And I think a month later, we had our first 5,000 square foot warehouse up in Chennai. We were running it again from first principles. We said, look, it needs some place for the products to go, some place for them to come out, some place for us to package them and move them. So I think we've been held in good stead by the fact that we ask fundamental and fairly stupid questions sometimes, but we've also discovered that the most stupid questions are sometimes the most insightful because they force people to really think of everything they take for granted. So it's not been a barrier, I would say, for the longest time. There are parts of the business now where we've brought in experience, but those are the parts where we really need it. Otherwise, we continue to remain first principles focused. Delhivery started out as a transportation company. We said we would be the fastest and the most reliable company to deliver at the last mile for online retail. That was the extent of what we wanted to do at that time. Over a period of time, what we realized is that we wanted to play a larger and more active part in the entire e-commerce supply chain. Today, if you ask me where we are and what we want to become, the closest analogy I'll give you is your mobile phone stack, right? You have the user, you have the device, so you have an Apple phone, you have the platform, which is iOS or Android, and you have applications on top of that. Now, you as a user interact with the application via the device and the platform. In any commerce transaction, similarly, there's the user, there is the infrastructure, there is the platform, and there's the application. So similarly, when you buy something from Flipkart or from Amazon, there's a platform which enables that order to be processed. And then there is an infrastructure layer which brings the order to you. As Delhivery, we started off in the infrastructure layer. We provide warehouses, we provide our own transportation network, our own packaging services to various kinds of customers. But over a period of time, what we're trying to do is to also become the single largest platform for e-commerce in the country. And when I say platform, what I mean is, it's sort of, think of it as e-commerce in a box. Whether you're Flipkart or Snapdeal, or you're a small merchant, or you're Arvind Mills, or you're an international retailer, or you're an individual who wants to sell art online, what Delhivery allows you to do is to essentially take a catalog, put it up online, have access to an order management system, a shipping system, and then we have our own shipping network. So we're slowly moving from being just the infrastructure layer or just the device in a mobile phone to saying we will also provide the entire platform as a service to everybody who wants to go online. And that's really Delhivery's business model. The idea is it's an integrated solution for anybody who wants to go online, and it's completely modular, so you can sort of pick and choose which services you want to use. You could come to me and say, I have my own warehouse, I want to do transportation. Great, Delhivery is a transportation solution. You could say, well, I have my own trucks, but I need the IT to manage the trucks. Say, all right, take our transport management system. You could say, I don't know anything about e-commerce and I just want to outsource the whole thing. What I'm great at is taking fantastic photographs and framing them, and I want to sell them online. So we build your catalog, we warehouse stuff for you, we transport it for you, and we manage payments for you. So that's really the power of the overall business model, and that's really what we're trying to build here. UniCommerce is a technology platform alone, and for a very specific need, which is warehousing and order management, which is a sub-part of the entire e-commerce stack, all the way from order to delivery to payments. We view UniCommerce less as a competitor and more as a partner. Of course, now I think they're a part of the Snapdeal ecosystem, so I don't know if they're really third party, but any such application, whether it's UniCommerce, whether it's Brown Tape, whether it's Shopify or Zeppo or Shopmatic, whether it's CartRocket, ShipRocket, all of their products, we view these all as extensions to the platform. One of the advantages when you go from the infra layer into the platform layer, or when you're not an application, is that you view people around you less as competitors and more as partners. So even for us, UniCommerce, if a merchant is using UniCommerce to manage orders in his warehouse, hey, no problem, yeah. We'll integrate with you. Our shipping network will be available to you. So by all means, use UniCommerce for order management, use us for transportation. That's the advantage of a modular platform. We're not clearly either B2B or B2C. We're actually what is called B2B2C, which is really from Flipkart through us to the consumer, or from Amazon through us to the consumer. Classical B2C marketing is driven around the creation of an sort of a direct consumer brand, right? You will recognize Nike, you will recognize Flipkart, you will recognize Amazon, you'll recognize, I don't know, your favorite restaurant. The way that is done is to create a product that the consumer likes, to essentially maximize his usage of that product or that service. It's sort of a more extrinsic brand building exercise. We, by virtue of being B2B2C, so our guys are the guys who come into your home to deliver the product, but per se, you haven't purchased the product from me. So we're creating a derivative brand in some ways. But think of Federal Express. It is one of the world's 5 most valuable brands, and it's actually a B2B2C brand. It's not really a consumer brand at all. So we are more sort of in that category. The difference is that from our client's perspective, it is not just the product or the service that we create that is essentially what we have to market, it is a relationship-driven process as well. We build deep, long relationships with the customers we service that very often last over many, many years. So in our case, obviously, we're a 4-year-old startup. The oldest relationship we have is exactly 4 years old, right? And it's a relationship that we keep investing in, and not as extrinsically as we do in let's say a B2C environment. But equivalently, we're cognizant of the fact that we're also a consumer brand. When you're driving your car, you see a delivery van or you see a delivery rider on the road, or you pass by one of our warehouses. There, I think what we're trying to sort of press on is that our service is really what creates our brand. When you as a consumer expect your parcel in 2 days or in 1 day or in 3 days, as long as delivery, we make sure that you get it in 2 days. When our guy comes to your house to deliver the product, it's a pleasant experience for you. That really is how we build our brand in the consumer's mind. Now, why is that crucial? Because while we're not a direct consumer brand, at some stage, consumers are going to choose who their shipping provider should be on a Flipkart or an Amazon or a Snapdeal or anywhere else. And at that stage, building that consumer brand is very crucial. So in our case, the brand with the consumer is more about reliability, it's more about trust, it's about creating a perception of what our values are in the consumer's mind. So consumer has to say, delivery, trustworthy, reliable, fast, I get a pleasant experience every time I deal with them. I think in general, B2B marketing teams, from what I've seen, tend to be, and especially delivery, we have a fairly experienced team. These are people who have spent 10, 15, 18 years in marketing, in business development, versus consumer teams are more creative, let me put it that way, because they're engaging such a large set of people in a single go and sort of trying to figure out which product sells to which guys. They necessarily have to be very creative. Whereas in our case, we're sort of we try to understand our customer over a very, very long period of time, saying, if I look at this guy's business now and I look at it 5 years from now and I look at it 15 years from now, how is he going to evolve, and therefore how should delivery as a service provider evolve along the way? So I think the big difference is sort of in the experience and the manner in which they engage. B2B teams tend to be smaller, I would say, in size. We don't have a very big marketing or a business development team at delivery. For instance, in, let's say, a traditional retailer, you would have, India's largest retailers would have upwards of 500 people in their marketing teams, probably. At delivery, we have about 80 people in our sales, BD, marketing teams. So we tend to be a slightly lighter, smaller team. The bigger difference is also what we sell. While fundamentally both B2C and B2B marketing do boil down to sort of the same selling process, a lot of our time is spent on, it's the classic FBA model. What is the feature of what you're selling? What's the benefit of the feature, and what's the advantage of using delivery, right? To give you an example, a feature of my face is my nose. The benefit of having my nose is that I can breathe, and the advantage of breathing is that I stay alive. We spend a lot of time trying to say, as we build out delivery, as we build out this platform, we need to break up what we do into features, benefits, and advantages, and really represent that to our clients. So that's really what our teams, our B2B teams, spend doing. In B2C, what you can start doing over a period of time, obviously you need features, benefits, and advantages, is I think you also get an emotional connect sort of with the brand over a period of time, right? I wouldn't say it's irrational decision making, I'd just say B2B tends to be far more rational. People buy an Apple iPhone because it looks good. You could give them a Micromax phone which is 70% cheaper and they're still going to go out and buy a 40,000 rupee phone. So it's a little bit of an irrational decision-making process. That doesn't happen in B2B. If I walk up to my client and say, my product is 4 times as expensive as the nearest guy, and yes, it's just a marginally better version, he's not going to buy it. So I think we need a more rational sort of team, which is where we don't spend as much time being creative and trying to create that emotional connect, perhaps. Service delivery online is important to us, but we're not a digital marketer. So you will not see us using Google AdWords or advertising on Facebook. Service delivery is crucial. So a lot of people interact with us through a digital medium. Whether it's you coming to our website to track where your product is, whether you're a merchant reaching out to us to say, where is my inventory, whether you're calling us up at the call center, whether it's a chat window, right? Those things are crucial, and therefore managing our digital presence is extremely important. But as delivery, I would say our biggest work is done offline. We've got 12,000 people on the ground who are brand ambassadors out there every day on the roads, and people are seeing them. We've got physical infrastructure, which really serves as our recall point. And outside of that, I think the only other place where digital plays a role for us is creating awareness of what we do. So, for instance, if we wanted to reach out to 15,000 small enterprises across the country, we would have videos, for instance, which talk about the kind of services we offer, the locations we're present in, and then use, let's say, a YouTube or use our own website to sort of reach out to these guys. So we'd use it for education and we'd use it for managing service, but not really as a direct marketing tool. Ultimately, what needs to go out as content is determined by a combination of our business development team and our communications team. What we like to identify first is this a clear message of our value proposition when we're marketing it to, let's say, a merchant or an enterprise? First of all, what is the exact message I want to give the guy on the other side? The exact message is that Delhivery is a fully integrated platform that can manage your entire e-commerce operation. Great. Then you break it down, saying, what does that really mean? It means if you want to go online as Delhivery, I will build your catalog, I will do warehousing for you, I'll do transportation for you. Next question is, all right, why should I trust Delhivery? I should trust Delhivery because they do 200,000 orders a day, they're present in 300 cities, they have 1,000 stations. That's sort of how we build out the content side. So we start off by saying, what is the message? What are some of the sub-messages that we want to convey? What's the data that backs that up? And then sort of that becomes the content package that goes out to the merchant or to somebody else. And the idea is also to keep it as short as possible. People have online attention spans are very small, so you've got to pack all of this into a minute and a half, 2 minutes, 3 minutes kind of time frames. Keep it short, keep it simple, and then just tell people, reach out to us offline, and we'll talk to you in depth about what we do. So people were finding us and reaching out to us, which is good in a way because it's reflective of how large the need is for the market you serve. But I think now the sort of basic steps we follow. One is, how do I discover who's going to be a new client? So we have a team which scours the web and goes to industry associations and to bodies and looks at essentially all of their members and reaches out to them, which is sometimes cold, sometimes warm leads, depending on whether we know the person or not. Then obviously we meet them, we make the pitch, we say, look, this is what Delhivery can help you with. We go through that entire sales process. Usually when it comes to our entire platform, it's a multi-step selling process. So usually your foot in the door is transportation, because every business has a transportation need, right? And it's easy to sort of go in and say, I will manage shipping for you, right? Whatever you produce, you ship it somewhere. So, let me sort of be a part of that process. That's the foot in the door. Once we get in, and that's typically about a 2-week sort of cycle. So the initial cycle is about 5 to 7 days to identify a customer, about 2 days to really talk through what we do and to go through the pricing and everything else. And then it takes about a week to 10 days to onboard the customer within our systems. So in about 2 to 3 weeks with a mid-sized client, we're ready to go. And then we just start off. Now, 2 things happen after that. One is because we make an investment upfront in onboarding the customer for 7 to 10 days. All further integrations become much faster. So if somebody then wants an add-on pack on the warehousing side, it's literally 3 days for us to do it. From then, if it's somebody says, I want your cataloging service, it's immediate. We can say, switch on, we start tomorrow, right? So it's important for us to make that first investment of 7 to 10 days versus just going and just quickly onboarding a guy instantly. But that's really the sales cycle, 3 to 4 weeks for a mid-sized customer. For an enterprise customer, it tends to be much larger because enterprises they go through a lot more hoops, let me put it that way, right? So you will typically make your proposal, you will then, or there'll be an RFQ, you'll go meet the guys a couple of times, you'll really explain why they should work with you. Then they will negotiate with you on pricing for 2 weeks or for 4 weeks or for 6 weeks. All of the drafting will re-happen. So we have a standardized contract for the mid-sized players and we have a bespoke contract for enterprises, right? So when you do that, the contract goes for another 2 or 3 weeks. So the whole thing can take up to 3 months with an enterprise customer. And with a very small customer, you just have a digital contract on your website. You say, log on, just tell us. So you could be Sahil at sahiljams.com if I make jams. And I just say, yes, I want to use delivery services, tick, tick, tick. here are my gems, this is where I am, somebody please call me and get me started. And that will be like 2 days. The two big mistakes we made, or the two big things that we learned. One is when you're 50 people, it is all right to get by on motivation and on energy. Um, what I mean by that is, if something's not working, I was personally there to immediately solve an issue, or Suraj was there, or Mohit was there, or all three of us were there to solve a problem. But as you sort of start getting larger, a certain amount of systems, a certain amount of process is important. And I think we took some time to sort of build out our systems and processes. They're still evolving, but I think at that stage, we found ourselves once in a while in a state of complete chaos. Something's happened, we're trying to respond on the ground, and then it's happened in 3 places at the same time. And so the question is, how do you respond? And there's no systematic response or process to resolve. Connected to that, obviously, is that it is important as you start getting larger to plan. I've seen cases where startups are very anti-planning. They're like, no, we're a startup, we don't plan. That is not the definition of a startup, right? As you start growing, it is important for you to figure out how that growth is going to happen, who you need to make that growth happen, how much capital do you need to make that growth happen, right? And so I think planning becomes a larger part, which I think was one of our big insights. The second one is sort of a very tactical thing, and I'm surprised that we didn't spot it given that we come from business school and consulting backgrounds. Very often startups forget that your financing is great, but the one element they forget is working capital. And I think we forgot that once. And that was the only time we made that mistake, where we calculated the amount of capital we needed. We raised exactly that amount of capital. And we actually weren't burning any money at all. We were profitable. And we still found ourselves in a situation where we said, there's no money in the bank. And we said, why is there no money in the bank? And then we said, hang on, our working capital cycle's off. We are paying in 30 days and receiving in 60, and that's why we don't have any money in the bank. It was a big shock to us, and it seems trivial and small right now, looking back, because now we've obviously improved at managing it. But I've met many startups along the way who simply forget to factor in how much money they need to keep the lights on. So when we started Delhivery 4 years ago, our vision was fairly simple. It was to simply be the most reliable, fastest transportation player. That's it. The culture, I would say, was simply the culture was simply reflective of who the founders were. We were fast, we were aggressive, very informal, and sort of, go get it right now, do everything right now, be on the ground right now kind of culture. In the last 4 years, I think what's changed the most is our vision's become much broader. And a part of that is our desire to really play a larger part and a more active part in sort of the development of e-commerce. We had two choices. One is, as a transportation company, as a warehousing company, become very, very large, but sort of see yourself as a passive member of the entire ecosystem, right? The other was to say, we will play an active role in e-commerce in India. And by that I mean, we're not going to wait for I'll give you a classic example. We're the only company which has launched our rural distribution initiative much before anybody else has. And the reason is we don't want to wait for rural consumers to demand e-commerce. We're saying, as a transportation company, as a warehousing company, if I can service that market, demand will come. So we're creating supply, and our assumption is that supply will create demand. And that's where our vision has really become broader. We are looking at every pocket of growth that we can, not just within e-commerce alone. And when we say e-commerce, we truly mean any transaction that's digital, not you buying a pair of shoes from Flipkart alone. You could be buying medication from GlaxoSmithKline, and that's still an e-commerce transaction for someone like Delhivery. So what we're trying to do is to broaden our vision and say, what are all of the pockets that we can think of on online consumption, and how does Delhivery fit into those, and how do we service those? So it's driven by a much broader idea of ourselves in the ecosystem, saying that we have the power and therefore the responsibility to do more, and we can. And B, we will be more active. We will actively bring e-commerce to the country. We'll actively bring digital commerce to the country. And that's really how the vision has changed. So the first reason for why we all succeeded was that we were together. in it. Would any of us have been able to do it by ourselves? I don't know. We were the closest of friends who quit to start a business together. I mean, to that extent, we've all had the privilege of doing something we love with people we actually really care about. But more importantly, I think what stood us in good stead and what I think has worked is sort of banal as it sounds, we work very hard. There is not a single member of our team, and specifically within the founding team, who has not put in multiple day shifts to sort of build out what we've built and still does it. So one is working really, really hard. B is we've always been able to think from first principles. We came from core engineering backgrounds, core business school backgrounds, and we used everything we'd learned to sort of build Delhivery. Also, I think what stood us in good stead is we think about our business continuously. In fact, one of the things we've seen happen as businesses get larger, and that's true with many of our competitors, is they stop thinking about who they are and what they're trying to do. It sort of just becomes a matter of daily course that we are India's biggest transportation company. That's all we will ever be. But that means you're looking at a business for what it is today and not for what it can become sort of 10 years from now. So I think A, our team, B, working hard and first principles, thinking about the business. C, what's kept us ahead is it's a very, very private thing across the 5 founders of the company and our larger management team. We've been able to instill it in that is we try not to drink our own Kool-Aid as we're growing. Once in a while you do get carried away because you're growing, there's all this news saying you got this much money, you got funded, blah, blah. But I think what keeps us grounded is we always think about not what it is that we've done that's gotten us here or why we're so awesome that we will win in 5 years. But we have a weekly meeting to say what can kill us. What is the one thing that if it happens in the next week, in the next month, in the next 3 months, in the next year, which if it happens, will destroy everything that we've tried to build. And then we correct backwards from there and say, to protect ourselves from that, what do I need to do? Right? For instance, I think we must be, and I'm saying this with no data but complete conviction, I'm sure that we're the only company in India which is going to research drones. We have the ability to manufacture them today, we have the ability to fly them. But we're the only guys who have that. And the only reason we did that, even though there's no applicability in the near future, is we said, look, 5 years out, some chap is going to build drones somewhere in a basement. And then tons of logistics companies are going to be flying these all over the place. Do we want to be the only logistics company that has to buy drones from somebody else, or do we build these ourselves? And so that's what's kept us ahead, a certain amount of healthy paranoia. We don't have a, let me put it this way, we don't have a job form with a specific set of questions that we tick off and give people grades on. What we found is 2 intrinsic things really matter to us. One is sort of, is the guy generally sort of, has he got a fantastic track record either academically, if it's a fresher or someone who's fresh out of college, or an excellent track record at where he's worked. And has the guy demonstrated, or has the girl demonstrated a significant amount of motivation, ownership, and leadership at where they've been. I think that is the essence of what a startup is. A lot of people who can become leaders, who can think independently and build businesses versus being followers. So that's one, which is really what is the skill set, the motivation, and the softer skill set, not the harder skill set, which is, do you know how to build a logistics network? Maybe you don't, but do you have the soft skills to succeed? The second is really a combination of fit, but the question is fit with what? It is fit with the kind of company we're trying to become. And by that I mean there are a certain set of operating principles that we as Delhivery are very passionate about. Right? When you break down the classic vision, mission, values kind of thing, the question is there are a certain set of values that we're trying to inculcate within the company. And bear in mind that we're still a very young company. So some of this is, companies build cultures over 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years. We're trying to put that in place now. But we're very clear that, for instance, we believe service is absolutely everything. If a customer calls me at 1 in the morning saying, where is my box? If there is a humanly possible way for me to get that box to the guy in half an hour, it has to be done, right? B is being bold and adventurous within the company, which is there is no risk that we have not taken as a company, whether it's in terms of the kind of people we've hired, whether it's in the kind of risks we've taken operationally. whether it is going into the Northeast and saying we will be the first people to build out a deep network in the Northeast, we take these kinds of risks, and therefore we like risk takers to be in the company. So there are, for instance, we have a total of 8 or 10 values that we judge somebody on, right? For instance, prioritizing action versus discussion. We can all get into big meeting rooms and we can talk, the hind legs of a donkey, and it's not going to help if that doesn't translate into something on the ground. So I think what we look at is also fit with that value system. And when we speak to anybody across the table, we are measuring or we are thinking through how many does this guy really fit this value system that we have. Because you could come across a guy who is phenomenally bright and is sort of the sharpest guy you will meet, but is simply not going to place service above his work and is going to say, well, I'm too bright to go out and deliver products if I have to on a Sunday afternoon. And at that point we say, look, I'll pick the guy who's not as bright as you, but who is going to go out and do this on a Sunday afternoon, because at the end of the day, delivering that product pays a salary. And that's really why that value is important. So I think A, skill, and B, sort of fit with our values is how we judge whether people should join Delhivery or not. What investors have looked for has broadly remained sort of constant. They look for large markets. So when I told you right at the start, we were in an $80 billion market, which is going to spend 15% on our space. So we were already in a $10, $12 billion market. So it was a large market. There was a clear opportunity to create differentiation and a leading position in the market by virtue of being technology focused, by being process focused, by sort of redesigning the entire network. And see there were measurable positive unit economics for the business, which means this was not going to become one of those things that just sucks all the money out of a bank account. So I think large market, ability to differentiate, and winning economics are sort of what venture capital and private equity investors look for. But I think one of the other things that they also look for, when we started out raising capital, was very hard, to be honest, in our Series A and our Series B rounds, because it was difficult to get people to get excited about what we were doing. Everybody is excited about the front end. They're excited about consumer businesses, right? But not so many people look at businesses which service consumer businesses and say those are exciting businesses too. And I think at that stage, what really helped investors take the plunge was to say that this is a team we're willing to back. That we will back Sahil, Suraj, Mohit, Kapil, and Bhavesh, because they seem like guys who can solve this problem, who really care about this problem, and maybe sort of, they may not crack it in its exact shape or form, but I think they'll be successful entrepreneurs. So I think that's sort of the team is sort of the fourth element which matters to venture capital and private equity investors. So we frequently disagree with our investors in terms of our outlook on the market, in terms of how we want to grow the business. But most often, I think we end up, by virtue of the fact that we run the business and we're so close to what's going on, I think our judgment is usually sort of more nuanced and is often correct. We debate a lot on practically a weekly basis, because we don't treat our investors so much as investors, and they're really more as sounding boards. They're on our board of directors. It's more sort of a collegial relationship. So we'll end up debating stuff every week and random sets of them. So one of our investors is an expert on online commerce. So every time I have an idea on sort of how the market is going to evolve, just call him up and say, hey Suvir, what do you think of this idea? How do you think this market is going to move? Another one of our investors, for instance, spends a lot of time on the governance side of businesses. So every time we want to build out an audit committee, we have compensation reviews, give him a call and say, how do you think we should be doing this bit? So we have less conflict, honestly. Where we do have conflict is in our fairly strong opinions on how to build the business, how to sort of negotiate with the market. There, we just, at the end of the day, the more rational voice and the more sort of nuanced voice wins. Though I don't like the word wins in this case. So we have debates, but I don't think we ever end up in a fight sort of situation. Two things I can think of immediately. One is I would have started earlier. I think we had the idea. It was on the drawing board, and it just took us an additional sort of 3 months to get out there and do it. we hung on, I think, a little longer than we should have. B is, I think, we could have been more decisive with the people that we had in the early days and that we have even now. So like I said, when we do the skill and value fit metrics for hiring, over a period of time, it's not necessary that a guy who represents that he's the right guy in the interview will be the right guy through his career. And I think where we found dissonance, initially we were hesitant, we were slow. What we've realized is that in the early days of a company, you really don't have the luxury of making recruiting mistakes or bringing on people who don't fit. And I think we lingered in some cases far too long, to the detriment of both the individual and the company as well. I would have changed, I think I would have changed that. Other than that, absolutely nothing. Like I said, we had the privilege of starting a business with our closest friends. I don't think there's anything we would change about that along the way. I think the biggest trend is the headline trend, which is that e-commerce is here to stay. There will be short-term shocks and setbacks to this market, but just from a core value proposition to the end consumer standpoint, this is a market that will be large and will be all pervasive. I think the big sub-trends within that are you will see a large number of categories moving online. Today, people don't buy furniture online. They don't buy consumer durables as much online. I think these are categories that will move. I also think you will see very interesting B2B models starting to evolve. The B2B model in offline trade is a deeply sort of inefficient model. Let me give you an example. If I'm a small garage in Surat, how do I order spares? It's not a very clear and clean supply chain. There is a way to do it, but it's not very clean. And most likely, I have no way to really reach a representative of an OEM. I think digital will change all of that completely. So the other big trend is that we expect B2B markets to go online in a very big way in the next 5 years. Part of the reason is because offline B2B is just deeply inefficient today. As an example, if you're a small garage or an auto shop in Surat, how do you connect with an OEM all the way upstream? And I think digital will change all of that. Supply chains will become tighter. They will become closer to the end consumer through online. I also think other interesting categories like food, medicines, these are also ripe for sort of going online. And when you think of e-commerce as a whole and you abstract it out of product retail and you say services as a part of it, I think you're going to see healthcare go online. Cabs have already gone online in a very big way. There's really no limit to sort of how this sector can grow in the next 5 years. So we sort of are deeply optimistic about the headline message, which is sort of e-commerce is going to be here in 5 years. I wouldn't be surprised. Today, people are saying e-commerce will be a $100 billion market in 2020. I would be completely unsurprised if it turned out to be a $200 billion market in 2020. I think the consumer move is just far too strong. There is a big skill gap today, in not just in e-commerce alone, not just on the front end side, on the supply chain side, all through. How we have to solve it is ultimately by training. India remains one of the only countries in the entire world, for instance, where we do not have master's programs in transportation technology, in logistics, on supply chain. People become general managers, they become mathematicians, they become engineers, they learn how to build engines, but nobody spends time on actually understanding how essentially a business like ours, which keeps the wheels of the economy turning, how that should run. And I think over a period of time, companies like us are just going to have to go out and co-invest in building these capabilities with someone. Whether we all get together and build it, whether we build it with universities, we're going to have to do that. At the lower end, it's going to be a problem of, we're already seeing it, we're going to be creating enough jobs. The question is, are there enough people who are going to come in and fill those jobs? And we've seen some changes in India. Today, it is not as much of a social stigma is not the right word, but let me just use it anyway. To say you drive a cab for Uber, which it was 8 years ago. 8 years ago, if you said I was a taxi driver, you were a taxi driver. Today you're driving a cab for Uber. And I think one of the things that is changing in India's dignity of labor is fundamentally changing. And I think technology is changing the way we look at some of these jobs. And I would say a field rider is absolutely no different. Today, attracting a field rider is becoming easier for us than it would have been, let's say, 5 years back. Because what would I tell a guy? Start off with me and deliver parcels on my behalf, right? As a member of Delhivery. Very hard to sort of convince the guy that that's a career that you can actually build. But now the advantage is people come in and then we train them up. And we say, look, if you spend a year being on the field and actually delivering products, over a period of time you become the assistant manager of the place you're at. You become a manager, you go all the way up. And I think that is something that is beginning to change, but that's going to be one of the big bottlenecks over the next 5 years. Skilling people up to sort of make that cycle virtuous versus becoming a vicious cycle where they come in and then they realize there's nowhere to go because they're not trained. Then they leave, then nobody wants to join you and the whole thing collapses. So we're going to have to train these skills into people. How do you deal with customers? How do you think about transportation problems? How do you, in some cases, how do you read? Right? Even that's a very basic skill that a lot of people don't have in the country. All of these are things we're going to have to build. We really don't care where you got your skills from. Online, offline, at the workplace, not at the workplace, through life experiences, through your boss, it makes no difference to us. We are going to create a delivery alone, another 85,000 jobs in 4.5 years. If we spend too much time nitpicking about where somebody got their skills from, we would have nobody to hire. We really don't care. And I think different people respond differently to various media. Maybe somebody learns extremely well online and somebody learns extremely well in a classroom setting. We, as an employer, really don't care. 3 words, seize the day. It is scary, but it is the singularly most rewarding experience of your lifetime. If you have an idea, don't worry about whether it will work too much. If you're confident it will work, get out there, do it. Try as hard as you possibly can. Never give up, and it should succeed. Seize the day.